So welcome. Welcome to everybody who is watching us, who's watching the video, the recording, who is watching us live on the social media. So welcome to a roundtable discussion about the liver diseases as a part of public health policies. And this is part of the Let's Talk series at European Liver Patient Association. My name is Marco Koreniak. I'm the president of European Liver Patient Association. And together we will have a really focused discussion on the big questions that we have today. For example, how can we place liver health higher in the European public health policy agenda? And how should long-term and comprehensive public policies be structured? So the name of this roundtable discussion is Metabolic Associated Steatohepatitis. We have some really impressive speakers and the people who will discuss for today, but let's look at the facts. So chronic liver disease led to a little less than 290,000 deaths in Europe in the year 2029, in which 63,500 were due to primary liver cancer. Liver-related death accounted for 3% of all deaths in Europe in 2019. Fatty liver is becoming a leading cause of liver-related mortality in Europe, and it's predicted to become the leading cause of end-stage liver disease in Europe. 1 in 3 school-aged children in the WHO Europe region are living with overweight or obesity, and the rates are increasing in many countries. If the prevalence of fatty liver continues to rise in line with the obesity prevalence, associated costs could increase to an estimated 334 billion euros in Europe over the next 10 years. Europe has also, unfortunately, the highest rates of alcohol consumption globally. The incidence of liver cancer in Europe increased by 61% and the mortality by 56% in the years from 2000 to 2019. So we believe the time for action is now. So how can we place the liver health higher on European public health policy agenda? Hepatitis, obesity, alcohol, socioeconomic factors, commercial determinants. It seems to be a war on all fronts. However, these fronts are interconnected. How should long-term and comprehensive public policies be structured? Primary prevention, education to save lives and money. Why it's so difficult to get this message across both the policymakers and also the general public? And how can prevention strategies be implemented and improved? Social and commercial determinants of health play a crucial role in health inequities and inequalities across Europe. Therefore, upstreaming factors that influence health are vital. Which policy intervention should be designed to address those factors, in addition to clinical approaches and interventions that are aimed at modifying a behavior? So for today, we will have a welcome speech from a member of European Parliament who is deeply interested in all issues that have a connection with liver health. We are honored that we have Ms. Lyudmila Novak with us. Then we will continue with 3 high-level speakers with Professor Alexander Krak, Professor Marco Greco, and Professor Alessandro Gallina, and we will together explore how to put this topic higher on a European health policy agenda. So let's start with the welcome speech from Ms. Lyudmila Novak.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin this speech by giving my apologies for not being able to attend this conference due to other commitments. I'm honored to address this gathering as a member of the European Parliament, focusing on the urgent issue of fatty liver disease. This growing health crisis demands our immediate attention and response, as it affects an increasing number of people across our continent. The prevalence of MASLD in Europe and worldwide has reached alarming proportions. Recent data suggests that nearly 1 in 4 adults in Europe may suffer from it, with a significant proportion at risk of developing the more severe MASH. These statistics highlight the pressing nature of this issue. To effectively confront this public health challenge, prevention must be our primary weapon. We need to raise awareness among citizens about the risk associated with unhealthy lifestyles, such as poor dietary choices and sedentary habits. Promoting healthy living and disseminating information about the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption, a significant driver of liver diseases, is essential. Furthermore, collaboration is key to successful disease prevention and management. No single entity or sector can address complex issues like MASLD and MSH in isolation. We must foster collaboration among healthcare professionals, researchers, policymakers, patient advocacy groups, the food industry, and individuals. Together, we can develop comprehensive strategies to raise awareness, improve early diagnosis, and promote healthy behaviors that reduce the incidence of MASLD and MASH. I'm confident that this gathering will lead to productive discussions and collaborations, resulting in concrete actions to mitigate the impact of MASLD and MASH on our society. Let us commit ourselves to this vital cause and work tirelessly to build a healthier, liver-conscious Europe for current and future generations. And speaking of future generations, let us focus on one of our most vulnerable populations, children. Obesity and liver diseases are on the rise among them. However, the health and well-being of our children are not only determined by genetics or individual choices, they are profoundly influenced by the social and economic conditions in which they grow up. Access to quality education, adequate nutrition, physical activity, and a caring environment play crucial roles in shaping our children's life, known as the social determinants of health. Addressing the social determinants of health in children requires a collaborative approach involving governments, civil society organizations, healthcare professionals, educators, and parents. Meaningful dialogue and cooperation are needed to design policies and programs that target the root causes of health inequities among our young citizens. With a sense of urgency and moral obligation, we gather here today to deliberate on how we can collectively strive for a healthier and more equitable future for all the young citizens of Europe. The health and well-being of our children are the foundation upon which the future of Europe is built. Today's event marks a significant step in a long and challenging journey, but together we have the power to make a difference in the lives of millions of Europeans. Thank you for your attention, and let us embark on this journey towards a Europe free of fatty liver. This is for the sake of our children and the future of our continent.
Thank you very much to Ms. Novak. We will take whatever she said and just try to gather as many of members of the parliament and the important decision makers to do decisions that are needed to put this higher on the public health agenda. But prior to doing that, we have some really interesting guests to discuss with me today what we can do. And the first one is, of course, Professor Alexander Krak is a professor at the Department of Clinical Research, University of Sandra, Denmark, and the head of hepatology at the Odense University Hospital. And we are honored that he's here today because he's also Secretary General of EASL, the European Association for the Study of the Liver. Welcome to this roundtable discussion. I will try to like read very quickly this long question for you. So chronic liver diseases, we heard from prior led to 287,000 deaths in Europe in 2019, of which more than 60,000 were due to primary liver cancer. So liver-related death accounts for around 3% of all deaths in Europe for the year 2019. Fatty liver is becoming a leading cause of liver-related mortality in Europe, and it's predicted to become the leading cause of end-stage liver diseases in Europe. Evidence suggests that liver diseases are at the heart of public health challenges for Europe in the 21st century. And we would really like to know from your point of view as a representative of European hepatology community and an expert in health, how can we place liver health higher in the European public health policy agenda?
Thank you very much, Marco, and thank you very much, ELPA, for inviting me and inviting Isel for this very important debate and collaborative effort. And I think one of the things we should do is what you are doing now. And I think just to add, it's very clear, the numbers speak for themselves. It is sad, really, that we have 300,000 people dying from a disease, which is, for most of the causes, 100% preventable. That's interesting, isn't it? Really thought-provoking. We also know exactly what's driving the disease. We know exactly what the consequences is, and we know actually quite well what to do. Yet, we largely do nothing. Isn't that depressing? Before I get back to that, then let me talk a little bit about it, because I think you've got the numbers there. They're massive. But of one number, I think, which is important, we disclosed in the East Lancet Commission, where actually, again, we had a politician, Ursula von der Leyen, doing the opening, and she said the same. It's interesting. Everybody sees and seeing the same. But it's the second leading cause of working life years lost. So it means that the impact of the financial system, the society in Europe, is massive. This is consequences for patients, but certainly also for their employers, their caregivers, their family, etc., etc. So let me get to that. What is actually, why is behind the lack of action? I don't know. So we don't need, if you ask normally people like me, we need more research. No, we don't need more research. We know exactly the link between overweight, obesity, alcohol, etc., and liver diseases. We also know that this cannot be solved by a healthcare system across Europe that is already under severe pressure and difficulties managing this. You have 50% of the population that is overweight, 10% of the kids. Yes, we got great drugs coming, but they cannot solve the problem. There's no doubt that prevention is the best cure. So I think, again, to say this is a multi-effort thing. We need basically to do as many things as possible. So the political level is obviously important. And before I come to that, I think we also do a lot around education. We certainly also use the scientific tool we need. We need to work on education, I think, larger, health literacy. Sometimes it's surprising to find that a big part of the population, and we have to acknowledge also those who are most at risk, are the more socially deprived, those with lower education, etc., etc. So this is not an easy thing. It takes a massive societal things, also the way we build society. But let me go to something we immediately can do. And we know that for more than a decade, the strongest tools, the levers we have, if we want to change something, are political. It's striking. You can do them tomorrow. They would save thousands of lives, yet we don't do it. So we know for alcohol, and it's very clear because some countries already done it. With alcohol, if it's, for instance, change the price, minimum unit pricing, as you know, in Scotland and Ireland, overnight, it reduces mortality. In the long run, it changes a lot. So we know that pricing, availability, and marketing changes a lot. What is the learning from the tobacco industry that has been responsible for millions of deaths? Again, controlling marketing, controlling prices has changed it dramatically. If you look at countries, my own, among young people, around 21% start smoking. In Norway and Iceland, it's 5%. Why? Political reasons. Price and marketing. Can we learn something like that in alcohol? I'm sure we can. And exactly the same also with unhealthy food. Why is it legal to advertise unhealthy food to our kids? Why is it okay when they sit on their computer watching YouTube or playing whatever they do? That's how they function. And then they are flooded with advertising for things that will, in the end, kill many of them, make their life miserable, when we could have chosen a different path. That's a big question mark. And yet, it's nice to hear the politicians say it, but I'd still like to see the action behind that. But of course, this is not enough. This is a long-term endeavor. So also, how do we work with a healthcare system that's actually ready to manage this, and we give the patient the right treatment? That's a separate one. But also think that working with health literacy is really important. And of course, the scientific system should continue to support politicians and decision makers with numbers, with data they can actually use, and then persuade the parliament, the politicians. And of course, we know that on the other side of that, we have an industry, the commercial partner, those who actually sell these products, alcohol industry, food industry, those who actually benefit from selling these things. Of course, it's legitimate to have a company driving and you can dislike their products, but equally legit it is for us to explain what are the consequences of having these products being the cheapest food or alcohol being super cheap, because the health consequences are massive. So I think that's the way we should work. There are no quick fixes here. But maybe I can talk a long time about that. I don't know if you want to challenge me with more specific questions. Maybe I can finalize here to say that now we are liver people, we are liver centric. But if you look, what are the factors here? The factors that is driving liver diseases is largely overlapping with the factors driving obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer. So actually, if you control, alcohol is responsible for around 6% of all cancers worldwide. So changing there is not only benefiting the liver, but certainly also the cancer. Unhealthy food, lack of physical activity, or let's say, how do we actually build a society that is physically active? The whole change in society the last 50 years is that we can largely be less and less physical active. So I think they're also coming together also with the other stakeholders. So we are not in a fight, let's say, with some of the other who work with metabolic diseases and who get most political attention, but rather say each of these behavior-associated factors, they have organ manifestations, and the liver is an important one, but it certainly has synergy with the cardiovascular system and cancer. So I think from the EASL side, we are very supportive of pushing this agenda and feeding into politicians a level where we can normally not do something, but education and science is certainly where we can distribute and supply the politicians with the knowledge they actually need and the correct data.
Thank you very much, Professor Krag, for excellent entrance into the big overview of what is happening. And of course, if hepatology has the first man for the job as you, Professor Krag, and if we can continue further, if patient movements in Europe has the first man or first person, that is definitely Dr. Greco. So we have Dr. Marco Greco with us. He is the president of European Patient Forum. He was the chairman of European Federation for Crohn and Ulcer Colitis Association. He worked at the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee at European Medicine Agency, where at the moment he's part of the EMA Management Board. Dr. Greco, welcome to our discussion. And now similar question for you. So we see hepatitis, obesity, alcohol, socioeconomic factors, commercial determinants, everything that was just described so really brilliantly by Professor Krag. Those are all, in a nutshell, the risk factors that lead to a serious liver complications. But it seems to be a war on all fronts. However, these fronts are somehow interconnected. So how should long-term and comprehensive public policy be structured from a patient perspective?
Thank you for this invitation, and I think it's a very Important day, important subject. I should start by echoing what has just been said by Alexander in the previous speech, because it's, it's difficult to add something, no? And this is somehow dramatic, because it is self-evident that we have a situation for which we have all the instruments for preventing and for avoiding certain situations, but this is simply not happening. From a logic standpoint, this is illogical. But it is a matter of fact, it is still there. There are, for sure, also, and they were correctly mentioned, a lot of pressures on the population, particularly on certain cohort of the population, no? That receives this kind of input, publicity. It's surrounding somehow, and this is particularly worrying for the younger generations. I mean, our kids are already exposed to certain kind of messages. We are becoming, as a society, less and less active, it has been said as well. So it's, and also from the perspective of patients' organization, this is a kind of peculiar situation, because we are mostly used to work on conditions that they are chronic, they don't have a cure. And in some case, I'm thinking about my personal background, we still don't know what are the causes, no, that are leading there. Here we have the causes. We know very well the process and the consequences, and we are struggling in intervening in blocking these consequential chain. I believe that usually the answer to this kind of situation, it's ridiculously easy, and it is education. But it's not easy at all, because education is a principle, no? Is a concept that is beautiful, but then to put this education on ground, to make it happening, it's not easy at all, because we are struggling with the cuts to the scholar system. We are struggling with the difficulties of having this kind of education. We are struggling in having this education when it is needed. How do you make this kind of education in schools? But they will tell you, oh, but there are a lot of other conditions that require attention, or there are other messages. But I mean, we are talking here primarily about how to teach to our kids to have an healthy life when it is possible. I mean, we are already exposed to a lot of other conditions, no? So we should at least try to make part of our basic education those things that will avoid us, things that we can avoid. So this is, but this requires a joint cooperation with the Ministry of Education in different countries. That requires the necessity of making clear that certain messages are wrong and certain messages are right. And there is science there that shows the connections. I'm saying this because I believe that also coping with health literacy issue requires the necessity of a joint efforts of different players here. So science, healthcare professional, they are essential for explaining and putting and creating the information instruments that we need to use. It is necessary to have a political action, and this, in my opinion, should be a European-based political action. We have seen some examples here and there with a Nutri-Score system that can be, of course, everything can be done better, but at least it's important to start doing something, and then we can work on tuning, no? But it is essential also to engage with patients organizations. Particularly when we're talking about health literacy barriers, the co-work with patients organization, co-design, it's the only way we have for improving the situation in the short and to make it shorter, the time frame of the improvement. First, patients organization, they know how to better communicate with people, with their members. Second, patients organizations are an essential source also of experience. And it's good, it's important, it's essential to show also, to have a live experience taken to the people, no, of what can happen in certain cases, because we have been through that before, in the years before also, when it was when we were talking about smoke. It took years, it took decades for accepting, making public what it was somehow already known that it wasn't good to do. And still the situation sometimes has a sort of reflux, no? It's coming back also periodically because there is pressure, there is social pressure there. So it has also to be from patients organizations, essential patients organization like HELPA, that needs the support in their action for simplifying the political process. If we need a political decision, we need also to create the instruments for our political class to take a timely and right decision. That is the result of making available instruments that are coming from science, and also making available instruments on how to communicate with patients, on how it is urgent, and the urge per se of this kind of messages that should come from patients' organization. But here we have another lack, another problem. Patients' organizations sometimes are still struggling for surviving. We are still struggling to demonstrate why we are important and what we can do. Finding resources for a patient's organization is not easy at all, and dedicating time to this kind of activities, it's draining a lot of resources, but this is essential. So if we all agree on how important these kind of messages are, on how essential for the future of European citizens these messages are, then we need to work together. We need to create a positive environment for making this happening, for co-developing, for co-designing, co-inventing new instruments. And we have all the players today here. We have science, we have public health, we have patients, and we have patients' organizations. It has to start from here. And then the outcome of this should be a political action that has to have the courage of moving on. It has to take the courage of taking decisions that appear to be difficult, but shouldn't be difficult. Because choosing to save lives shouldn't be difficult. And apparently, sometimes it still is. And this is the case. I fully support what Alexander has said, why it is possible to publicize to our younger generation unhealthy behaviors. It's illogic, but this is happening. And so science is saying that it is illogic. Patients' organization is saying that this is illogic. We need to move from here for doing the next step, because we all know what are the solutions. We simply need to have the possibility of making them real and to make them happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greco. And this is a view from like patients, we have the first man of many, so in the science, in hepatology, Professor Krak. And now we heard from the first man from all patient organizations in Europe. And we are just all saying the same thing. So let's move now and if there's a first human for public health, he's with us today. So we are lucky and honored to have Dr. Galina here. So he's focused on tackling non-communicable diseases through a science-based approach. So Alessandro is working to improve the health of European citizens. And I read somewhere that you are a firm believer in the axiom that prevention is key. And if we are talking about prevention, let's now focus on the prevention that is closely connected to health and also to livers. So obesity and overweight rates are about twice as high in children living in the lowest income lowest income families compared to those that are living in the high income families. So social and commercial determinants of health play a crucial role in health inequities and inequalities across Europe. So therefore, upstreaming factors that influence health is vital. And from your point of view, which policy interventions should be designed to address, for example, these factors? And in addition to clinical approaches and interventions that are aimed at modifying behaviors. And please, Dr. Galina, you work at the European Public Health Alliance. And the Health Alliance is the largest civil society platform of organizations that are working together to protect and improve public health in Europe. So Dr. Galina, so what are the approaches?
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to hear the previous speakers. Of course, I want to start saying that I must agree with them, and I would like to build on what has been said so far. Of course, social and commercial determinants of health play a critical role in shaping the environment in which people are living. These obvious health disparities regards obesity, regards childhood from different backgrounds, but also all the behavior, including smoking, drinking, eating unhealthy food, that represent risk factors for many of the NCDs, and 50% of these are preventable diseases. I understand that education plays a key role, has it been said, even though I think this is concerned the social determinants of health, and of course education is key, and at IFA we are working on this with targeted public campaigns for communities, for age groups, for geographical areas, and so on. But is it really an educational matter when the unhealthy choice is more convenient than the healthy one? I think the role of commercial determinants of health that they play in this scenario is not only affecting a disease like obesity or childhood as an age group or parts of communities, but entire society. From the IFA side, we acknowledge the relevance of marketing and product placement and the conflict of interest between private profit and public good. But also we are trying to be proactive on this. So I would like to come up with four, let's say five, but like education has been covered, four actions or areas that we're working on to try to tackle these determinants of health. For example, on marketing, we, together with partners, wrote a blueprint directive to call for EU to establish a control, to leverage the cross-border power that it has to control food advertisement for youth. And also we are about to launch a campaign in this sense. Also labeling is key. We also WHO with the update of the guidelines said that we need to categorize, to provide information about the food that we are consuming and buying. And we are advocating to have this system in place in Europe something similar on what France is doing on with the Nutri-Score. And also, since we know, it has been said, but unhealthy diets can have repercussion for the rest of everyone's life, we don't want to focus on early years only, but we want to extend the target group until 18 years of age. Also, we need to limit the access of unhealthy food. We are asking for local governments to control the fast food outlets nearby schools in marginalized areas, for example. And also, we're back from our scientific advisor, Professor Nick Sharon, who's advocating for the establishment of a different taxation system in order to tax unhealthy food. We have examples where this works. We have the tax sugar in UK, for example, and we will have money from this unhealthy food that can be used to promote healthy choices. So to use this money to subsidize healthy alternatives and to help people to make the healthy choice the most convenient, the default one. Also talking about actions from IFA, we are in another campaign called Buy Better Food, in which we are advocating for having always healthy alternatives in public procurements, including canteens from schools, for example. And this is not always the case in many areas of Europe. So yeah, I would like to say that education is key, but we should also work on how to redesign, reshape the environment to create a healthy environment where the healthy choice is the default one, and we do not blame people when the unhealthy alternative is the easiest to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Galina. And just let's stay with you and move from like the way to modify behaviors of the European citizens on the topic of how civil society can really play a role in designing more effective policies that will address NCDs. So we are all aware of the report on non-communicable diseases that was drafted by European Parliament Subcommittee on Public Health. And to that, we can add, of course, the European Commissioner's Healthier Together EU NCD initiative. So in recent years, your organization has strongly advocated for an urgent, strategic, and systemic approach to tackle NCDs. So are there parts that are still missing from your point of view? What are the next steps that European institutions should take? And of course, question from before, how civil society can really make a mark there.
Thank you again for the question. This is the best time to answer this type of question. And I want to start with the Sant subcommittee. It is a great sign that the ENVI committee in the parliament decided to create this subcommittee on health, and they work on NCDs. For the ones of you that don't know, they published the draft report, and we helped in designing amendments and have them tabled from MEPs and advisors. And I'm proud to say that out of 836 amendments, 211, 25% were the product of IFA together with our members, including ELPA. So it's a great sign that we are listened. Like our point of view, it's represented. Of course, we don't know how many of these will be voted and will end up in the final draft, but it's great that we have this point of view represented in the parliament. We don't know yet the impact that this report will have once published, but we can say that it will help to design the agenda of the new parliament and the new commission in 2024. So this is great to have this in mind, especially after the speech of the President von der Leyen at the SOTEU, where public health was barely mentioned. We know that population in Europe is getting older. The burden and insurgence of NCDs is rising for basically all the NCDs, and we need in Europe where we have better health for all. Too often in the recent years, we had better treatment for some in the best case scenario, because we struggle to really understand what prevention means. We need to build on that. We need better prevention policies, more comprehensive, more common on a European level. We saw that when an emergency arises, we saw on COVID with vaccines, Europe can act together, and in the kingdom of health, we should do the same on these other silent or slower emergency, that it's NCDs. And also we advocate a lot to avoid the mistakes that have been made in the past, but also I think it's important to acknowledge when something good has been done. And we have good examples regarding prevention and the addressment of social determinants of health. With the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, for example, we had a very important budget and a very ambitious approach. We had one pillar of prevention. We had, with the implementation of the roadmap of the plan, we had the inclusion of social determinants of health. And this has not been kept for the Healthier Together initiative, which aims to tackle all NCDs in Europe. So, of course, there's room for improvement there. What I really think it's important when it comes to tangible actions from the social, from institution and the civil society, we need a comprehensive strategy. I know, every time we tune in this type of events, we hear comprehensive, holistic approach. But the WHO recently published a manual on a system thinking approach to tackle NCDs and to improve healthy lifestyles. And it provides concrete examples when and where this system has been applied and it works. We have to understand the framework. We have to understand all the people, the players, the stakeholders involved to design policies, not only tackling the problem, but also the cause of the problem itself. And the second point that I want to make, to do this, we need to understand the framework. So we need data, we need evidence-based policies. And I heard before that we have the data, and this is true for the main findings, but when it comes to understand the social determinants of health or the implications that the commercial determinants of health they have on the environment, we are not there yet. We need more data and we need a more comprehensive understanding of the situation in order to create good policies. And to do this, civil society is fundamental. We are doing a lot. As I said, we're getting good feedbacks from policymakers so far and institutions, but I think we can agree that we could do more, we could do better, we could be more relevant. And the only reason why we are not there yet is for the funding system. So I really hope that the institutions from 2024, they will listen to our call for better funding frameworks, a multi-annual, more solid, more robust, more defined funding system. Yeah, addressing all of these three, I think we are getting closer to tackle the problem and to design good policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gallina. So it looks like, it's really the right time to ask these questions, because in a year and some month, we will have new elections, and we should review all the structures that are behind the people who want to be elected, re-elected, that are focusing on health and what exactly is there. And everything you said goes also in the direction that European institutions are listening to the initiatives from public health, from civil society sector. But in regards of the initiatives and proposing something, so Dr. Greco, you lead umbrella organization of patient organizations. They are very different. So you have a patient organization that is focusing, for example, on lung, on liver, or on kidney, or maybe also obesity, cardiovascular things. So also things that are closely connected to the health of the liver. And in regards of that coalition, so is there any idea how to improve the collaboration among different patient groups? So different groups that are from different areas, not just the patient groups from the same areas, but in order to enhance the collaboration with the patient groups that are very different.
Thanks. Thank you, Marco. That's a very good question. Of course, APF is a forum, no? And as the name suggests, is a place where to meet, even before representing patients. It was created for offering to all different patients groups from different areas the opportunity of meeting, of knowing each other. And one of the main purposes of that is to create and to see if they can create joint actions. Here, it is essential, I said it before, to think about a joint action, because not only because the liver is essential for our health, and an healthy liver is a great part of our health, as our grandma were used to say, but because a lot of things are interconnected. I mean, I'm not saying that all the diseases are originated by unhealthy lifestyles, but for sure, there is a scientific demonstration that they have an influence on many conditions. So we need to, I believe, to build from here for thinking about a way for creating, let's say, transversal alliances between patients. No, we have an health emergency here to be challenged, and we need to find allies wherever we can find them. As APF, we are more than happy to facilitate these encounters, this possibility of joint actions. And we may even think about, let's say, facilitating also a more structured approach to that. At the same time, in parallel, it is important, I believe, to have maybe European-funded projects that can work in this direction, because that is a relatively common, but at least well-known area in which of cooperation, no? In which it becomes easier to put together different stakeholders for going in a certain direction with the same idea in mind. It is essential to leverage attention on the necessity of having also public calls for working on these aspects, because that is a bit connected again to what I said before, no? In principle, it's the solution of a transversal cooperation between different patients groups, no? that have a common interest in these. It's there, it's also practical. But when it has to work on an everyday basis for a huge campaign, it has to be somehow sustainable and founded. And one thing that all the patients' organizations in this moment they have in common is that they are struggling for surviving. So maybe somebody more, somebody less, but it's an issue. Every time we need to start a new campaign, we need to join a new project, resources are the first thing. And so I'm sorry to come back there. But I don't want to say these for, let's say, making less important the reason why we're here today. It's the exact opposite. What we are doing here today, it is so important that it becomes essential to find the resources for it. This is a political priority we have to work on. And so it's good to find a way for joining different patients' organizations, also for leveraging this necessity together. And in this, if we, once again, let me repeat this because it's essential, we are working together with healthcare professional, scientists, and also with our public health colleagues. The joint action that we can create could even become unstoppable, you know.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greco. And if we move now from patient perspective, working together there, to the area where you are most at home, Dr. Craig, so Professor Craig. So it looks like a vicious circle that is very difficult to break, because it requires some kind of innovation in science, but also innovation in healthcare policies or whatever we are proposing. So do you see any way that these two aspects can work hand in hand towards the same goal? And with that, also a second question in regards of the other professional healthcare associations, as the Association for Diabetes, Cardiovascular Association. So are there any strategies in place where you can, that could be promoted to address the comorbidities that are here?
Yeah, I think, again, we actually got the knowledge we need. And of course, we should continue to work on research and innovation to find better solutions. And I think it's an important takeaway, really, that there's a lot of shared risk factors, and the comorbidities, yes, at a certain tipping point, then the liver is a leader of morbidity and mortality, and that's, of course, should be the focus. But in many of these patients in the decades preceding the liver, then they're more prone to cardiovascular disease. And again, it should be, I think, from all scientific organizations or patients organizations across Europe, because suddenly then we will have a strong voice. If we are not united, if we are separated, if we go alone, then it's much easier to ignore our voices and our concerns. So if we somehow can speak the same, be united, and I think the vision, we should have a shared vision. So reducing the harm from modifiable risk factors. It's interesting that these factors are modifiable. They're modifiable at an individual level. They're certainly also modifiable at a societal level. And therefore, I think we as scientific communities, and certainly also as patients, as caregivers, should speak this to our politicians, say, protect our citizens better against these things. And let us not just be subject to strong marketing campaigns that will continue to rise the use of unhealthy food with massive consequences related to overweight in the short term, cardiovascular disease, liver disease, metabolic diseases in the long term, and also alcohol. So I think it is important we have a shared vision. But it's also, it's very clear that vision without action is just daydreaming. And to be honest, if we should look at ourselves when we have these repeated meetings, often we are just daydreaming. We point to all the problems, we point to all we know, but do we actually do something? When do we start moving the needle? And that's, again, the level that we somehow need to get together and push and say, okay, what is the very, very, very concrete next action to do to actually start improving something? Not just continues to we say, okay, year from now, we say, okay, there's now even more people dying, or more cancer cases, that we consume more unhealthy foods, etc. And we keep describing the problem as we're just approaching the edge, and people are suffering from this. And that's also, I think, for EASL, the key in the EASL, the second iteration of the EASL Lancet Commission. The first one sort of described the extent of the problem, pointed to a lot, but now we want to work with implementation. And as we work with this, we will try to work with some kind of implementation at the same time. And I think that's where we come together. And as you alluded to there, Marco, the upcoming election is an opportunity. Can we get some of those people who actually work on our behalf to protect the society, to protect the citizens, among many things, but certainly also among things, modifiable factors that will have massive negative impact on health? They actually commit themselves to do something, because I think we're doing all the thing we can at our level, but clear and strong action from the political level to do this is not really visible, to be honest. And everybody speaks the same. So when Ursula von der Leyen opened the Lancet Commission, she said exactly the same. Yet, how many bills has been passed from the European Commission side or from national societies that better protect kids, adults, all those marginalized groups that are most susceptible to all these things. So I think we honestly, if we look at ourselves, so far it's a clear fail. So we need a clear vision. We need a clear benchmark. Okay, what does it actually mean to succeed? And go away from just continuous complaining. This is not good enough. People are dying. So and so many have this. Yes, we're saying that for a long time, and largely people don't care. And I think also for you and the patients, it's your voices have become very strong. Telling these stories, having the media also, that we can see we also succeed with in EASL, having the media telling individual patient stories. Maybe we can be lucky that we have just, like you saw with the tobacco industry back in the 70s and 80s. Could we now have people who actually have now got a severe disease as a result of a market campaign of these unhealthy things? That was clearly the consequences of these companies. They do know that this is unhealthy food. We do know unhealthy food leads to overweight, liver diseases, cardiovascular disease, cancer, etc. When do we get some really strong things so we can actually do something and follow in tobacco? And every year, this is delayed. Every year we will have thousands of more people who actually live with the consequences of this. So this is, of course, the battle against those who deliver it. And then there's a whole preventive thing, also building this into the way we build cities. I think this is already happening now. My country, many of them, we are biking cities. So people, they move around, and the health literacy, I'm not sure how it's penetrating. Do children actually learn in the school the difference between healthy and unhealthy food? I'm not so convinced. And yet it should be a fairly easy target. And then back to the politics. How do we make the healthy food not the most expensive food? Organic vegetables are super expensive. It's for guys like us, like me, privileged people with long education. Yes, we can afford it. All my patients, they cannot afford it. So we need to be honest and speak these things there. But always you, Marco.
Thank you very much, Professor Kruk. It's very simple. So you can be advocate today, but tomorrow you can be something else. But if you are living with the disease and you are a patient, you are here all the time. So we will be here all the time, pointing out to the things that needs to be done. And from this discussion today, it's clear that we just need not just one action, but we need several actions. We need several roundtable discussions. We need so many so that the decision makers will see it as a turning point for the policies, and then we will have them on board. So in regards of today's roundtable, I will just like to make a short summary and then give the floor for ending this roundtable discussion to our guests. But in regards of everything that you heard today, for example, from Professor Kruk, who explained to us that everything that we need to know about this condition is already known. We know everything that needs to be done, but we need to start working on it. We need to start improving the situation. And then we went to Dr. Greco, and one thing that struck me a lot was when he said, you know, choosing life or choosing protecting life should be an easy choice. It should not be the secondary or the third, but it should be the first choice. And then if you remember the talk of Dr. Galina, one thing that strikes us really badly is that unhealthy choice should be the choice that is like worse to make, that is hard to make, but sometimes the unhealthy choice is still today the easiest to make. So we need to try to change this. So this is like in a nutshell, a summary of everything that happened today from my perspective. Of course, we are working very closely with every stakeholder on this call. For example, we prepared a manifesto that is a common ground of civil society in regards how to structure the European Union institutions in order to not forget about health in the years to come, not just 1 year, 5 years, but in years to come. So we drafted a manifesto with 10 points, different 10 points that you can also consult. But in regards of everything that was discussed and said today, so but let's go now from different points to the first one. So if you can say in a nutshell, very condensed, maybe in one sentence, what do you think should be the most important thing that we should start to work on from tomorrow in order to tackle this very complex issue? And I will give the floor first to Dr. Gallina.
Thank you. Many things. If I can pick one, I think it should be to hold industry accountable, because education of the population is one thing, but I think changing law. Yeah, I don't want to talk more about this, but like hold industry accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker would be Dr. Greco, just in a nutshell.
Thank you. I think the first thing we need to do is to show that we are united. I want to echo also what Alexander has said before. We need to be united and to work together and to show that it is happening, because that will leverage the message and will make possible also the other steps. So we are happy also as APF to cooperate in this and to facilitate these, but let's work together in the same direction. Let's show that we have a common interest, and then we will not step back from these primary interest. The other things will follow.
Thank you very much. Professor Krag?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we should make it very clear to ourselves that vision without action is daydreaming. So we need to go from advocacists to activists. I think we should unite in a shared vision, basically to protect the next generation better against these diseases. Speak one voice.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the participating speakers, and thank you all for being with us today live on social media. And of course, if you're listening later, thank you for listening to this debate. Of course, we will be on top of the discussions, on top of the things that are going on in this area in health in Europe. But thank you for your time and commitment on this Let's Talk series about liver disease as part of the public health policies. Thank you.